Pineland. I'm your host, Tom Kaczynski, and I found a comfy spot which took a long time to find, but as you can see, I'm literally sitting in front of my shower, which is kind of silly, but I'm doing it because, frankly, y'all don't want to hear the birds going off this morning, and neither do I. The egg laying has been crazy, and hey, we need every egg we can get with these reports of avian flu, so I'm doing my part to keep the economy going, one chicken at a time. Anyway, the Lord's blessing be upon you. Today's date is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. It looks like it's about 6:15 a.m. here in the United States East Coast, and I wanted to just do kind of an update show. We're going to float around a little bit for maybe a half hour, so I can tell you what's been going on in the world, what I'm keeping an eye on, and what you should be as well. I've had a lot of people send me the information from the Stu Peters show. I'm going to watch that a little later today about potential contamination of the water supply with biological or other agents. Certainly something worth taking a look into. For a long time, people talk about fluoridation as a means of controlling the population. And if you wanted to have a way to have an indirect attack by a bad actor, whether it's a state or non-state actor, the water supply is certainly something to consider, especially as we're seeing, and this is kind of what I'm seeing coalesce. And tell me if you see the same, by the way. Share this in the comments as you go through what your own observations are. But one thing I've been watching is for the return of the COVID agenda, and as an example of that, I think they were saying next week in Philadelphia, they're going to reinstate the indoor mask mandate. And I was reading a lot of Pennsylvanians were talking about this, and they were saying that, like, okay, if this is an emergency, why aren't we doing it now rather than next week? And it kind of just reveals one more time how much the control agenda is at the heart of this and how much of it's all really BS. Yet we do see this control agenda being taken to the next level. For those who have been following, we've been talking about Shanghai a lot. Yesterday, or I should say 2 days ago, I haven't checked the numbers for today, but the day before they claimed there were 26,000 new cases, which what you want to put into that number is up to you. But the fact is people seem to be starving and running out of food over there. It's pretty bad. Let me see if I can find you just an example here. Give me one moment, please, and I will look, because I posted a couple videos just to give you some context here, what we're looking at in Shanghai. So let me unmute my computer here for one moment, and we'll flip the thing around so you can just kind of see how crazy it is there. Okay, so let's turn that around. Give me one. I did that wrong. 1 second, please. Turn that to full screen. Flip the thing. All right, so this is imperfect, admittedly, but this is just one video coming out of Shanghai. We're sharing these through Telegram. Our Telegram group's t.me/Atlantic Homeland. Besides the camaraderie, you can sometimes see news there. Now, from what we're hearing, just to give a little context to this, people are starving over there. And I've wondered if one of the reasons why China's doing this beyond control mechanisms is they're running out of food, which is a real possibility. I mean, China's talking about not even being able to export seeds. And, why that would happen was a food stock damage. China's so tight-lipped about what's happening over there, it's really impossible to draw any conclusions. And there's other ones of people screaming out should I say, where they were living. Here's another one. Peru is going nuts here, just to show you another country that's on problems with they can't afford the fuel. They kind of have a left-wing government down there, but the riots are on, and we're seeing this in more and more countries, and we're seeing food scarcity in what they call, quote, the global south become a real problem. You can see another example. Kind of looks like a Black Lives Matter protest. A riot. Anyway, so that's what's happening out there in Peru. Looks pretty bad, and the government's kind of struggling to take control down there, but people are looking for supplies and their ability to survive. So, hey, good to see you, CQ, Ben. Glad you're here. So you can see what's happening over there in that part of the world. People are all pissed off. Anyway, you get the gist of it. So anyway, and that is the Telegram group. You're certainly welcome to join it. We recommend you do so. You'll have a good time. You'll learn things. And we always try to stay ahead of the news cycle. Even when I'm not talking, we're ahead of the news cycle. If I'm taking a day off, it's usually because the news cycle is not so crazy that I have to do so. But some news coming out today. There's supposed to be a report coming out from the federal government about inflation. They had Jen Psaki, the Red Menace out there telling us to be prepared for it. It's going to be pretty bad. And that's nothing that will surprise any of you. We've talked about this at the channel channel for quite a bit. I was reading that if you use the old numbers to calculate what the running inflation rate was, it's running about 13%. Just to put it in context, 10% would be hyperinflation. At 10%, you would see three-quarters of the value of your currency lost theoretically within about a 7 to 9 month period, depending on where it exactly sits. So, just to give you a feel for how bad it's going to get out there, and we see famine issues coming out all the time, continuing references to the bird flu, culling of herds all around the place, and a lack of grains and wheats that are being used to feed the animals, as well as other problems. So, we could go into every little detail of it, and as bad as it is in the United States, it's even worse overseas for our UK listeners. I was reading Ice Age farmers talking about how there's no free range chicken over there anymore, that they're bringing everything in because of these avian flu threats that they're talking about. And the thing about it is this. I'm skeptical. I'm really skeptical because of what they did with the PCR testing, because of how this fits into the food chain reaction agenda. On the other hand, maybe. I mean, it's not impossible you could use these things as a vector, especially when you've been researching it for many years, like Bill Gates did. So, I mean, you have to be aware and you have to watch because the threats could come from a lot of different angles, but it's something we definitely need to be aware of. It's going to be a major problem here. And they had, what's his name, Redfeld out there was talking about the bird flu being the next big pandemic. So he was the creepy Amish kind of looking dude that used to hang out with, what was it, the chick with the sweater that Trump used to always bring out there. So we'll see what ends up happening. What's it saying? The FAO food price, that's an international index, is up 12.6% from February. Rationing of baby formula, just telling you different things that are happening out there in the world right now that you need to be aware of. And of course, that plays back into the problems of the politics, right? That at some point, the government's going to have to do something more than they're doing to keep people afloat because, and here in North America, and I would argue largely in Western Europe, people are kind of sitting back, but the economy is just going to be crunched. They put a whole bunch of gas into the economy to try to help over here, but realistically, those reserves are being depleted very quickly, and production is not upsizing to meet with it. So that's going to be a problem. And I don't really know what they're going to end up doing. I really don't, but I know that it's getting pretty bad out there. And we are in this weird, slow decline where I don't know really what to say too much because we're waiting and watching. Talking about, give you a Ukraine update. Russia has strategically withdrawn from Kiev to regroup and to focus on their holdings in the southeast. I know that ongoing battles continue in the Donbass. And you hear a lot of rumors going around about Western leaders and mercenaries and technologies being found in Mariupol, specifically in the Avastal steelworks. You hear stories coming out about labs being researched there. I've heard from now at least 3 different sources saying there's going to be a false flag where Kiev's going to get it. And don't be surprised if Lviv or Warsaw or somewhere else, or maybe even Vyborg, get it as well over in Finland. Where Putin, I don't know if this is true or not, but Putin's control on power is a little sketchy over there, apparently. And, people assume if he's gone, things are going to be better. There's hardliners over there. Shoigu's more of a hard ass than he is, so it might go the other way. So if that happens, who knows? Because it looks like within the next 2 months, if my guess is right, based on everything that's being telegraphed, Sweden and Finland are going to join NATO. They will probably come in together. Finland's leading the way a little bit. But if Finland goes, Sweden will go. That's kind of the way that works up there for whatever reason. And also another weird story that presages maybe a larger war, not getting a lot of play, but worth talking about, is there was a Chinese shipment of a whole bunch of anti-aircraft weapons, if I remember right. I know there were Chinese weapons in any case. It went to Serbia, and Serbia's arming pretty quickly. So if things get funny, look for the potential for yet another world war to be caused by problems in the Balkans, And I don't know, man. Someone just needs to win and claim that territory. I mean, I hate to be cold about it, but honest to God, the world would be better as long as the Bosnians don't win. Anyway, someone needs to just win the Serbian, what we used to call Yugoslavia, the Adriatic, and we'll see who ends up winning. I guess I'm rooting for I don't know who I'd root for. Maybe the Croatians. I don't know. Hard to say. But that's where we are. Let's talk about the French election for 1 second. So Macron and Le Pen are through to the second round. And the thing about the French election is it just shows you the point I've been trying to make to you, that politics is a shell game. Because, you know, instead of all these leaders going out there, Mélenchon and Zemmour and all them saying, okay, why don't we build a coalition so we can get rid of the Rothschild banker? They're like, oh, no, we can never have Le Pen. And look, I'm not the biggest Le Pen fan. She does some good things. She does some things that I'm not crazy about. But the thing about it is, you're never going to remove anyone else if you say, oh, well, we can never go there. So it's fine to have globalist wars of choice where bank debts are destroying everything and where you can have your country literally be overrun, where your leader doesn't want self defense. But God forbid you say, take care of the French people. You're going to have, that's going to be the line you're going to draw in the sand. But hey, that's your global elite for you. And that's what they do. They allow you to vote and vote and vote until it doesn't mean any difference anymore. So I hope Le Pen wins, even though it'll probably break up NATO, which is a problem. I mean, I'm not a fan of woke ideologies. I'm not a fan of NATO. I'm not a fan of big states. On the other hand, the West has a problem, European civilization, North American civilization, in that we are going to deal with a very hostile world in the not so distant future. And because of that, a degree of compromise is necessary. And the ability of, the Washington leadership, the way they're thinking about this. There was a really good piece in Zero Hedge about this that was talking about it, that the euro is weakening against the dollar mightily because Europe is going to have to buy everything from the United States, and they're going to basically be a captive market, especially to things like US LNG, unless the politics change there. And they very well may. That's the Russian and Chinese strategy to put the pressure on that pivot point. But in the meantime, while they don't, that's what's going to keep the American dollar afloat for a little while. And while we won't be living in prosperity, we won't be living in the awful austerity that's being promised for places like Central Europe, where they don't have the ability to meet their energy needs, and yet they're still shutting down all their nuclear reactors. I don't know what the hell is wrong with Schultz and the German leadership. I don't understand them at all. But on the other hand, I understand them perfectly. They're doing the job they were put in there to do, and the job they were in there to do was to complete the destruction of the German people. There has been, unfortunately, been a process that they've been working at for many, many years to good aplomb. So those are some of the things that I've been looking at out there in the world today, that have me concerned, at least, as we watch what's happening in the world today. One other thing a lot of people are talking about, not a big concern to me, but I do think it's kind of interesting, was the whole thing with, what's his name, Musk and Twitter. He bought, I believe, 9% of the stock or something, was invited to the board of directors, sat down to be with them, and they basically said, well, if you could join this, you can only buy a certain amount and you have to support our policies. Best I can tell, he told him to blow off, and we'll see. Maybe Twitter will have a hostile takeover, and it would be interesting to see a Twitter devoid of bots, where people actually put their ideas out there and what would actually trend if allowed to go organically. On the other hand, as interesting as Musk is, I still don't trust him, because, just some of the things he deals with AI, and I don't know, I'm pretty familiar with some of Grimes' work because Dana likes some of it. So I like it too, but she familiarized me with it. And so the sort of transhumanist views of it, where they're going with Starlink, where they're going with Neuralink, I don't trust it. So of course, I don't trust anything either, except I trust our community here, our fellow Pinelanders, and I trust our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So those are two things I do trust. Okay. So what else has been going on? Let me give you a personal update here. Surviving the Fall of America is completed, at least the first draft of it. We do have, I have two of my peer readers taking a look at it now, so a little bit of a process. We're taking some time to make sure we put the best book we can in front of you. Excited about the book. I'll be honest, when I was writing it, how should I put it? The final product was better than the sum of its parts in a lot of ways. And I don't say that in any bad way about my writing, but the way I actually write, when you're a professional writer, which I guess I am at this point, what you end up doing is you find a technique that allows you to put your work together. And for myself, what it ends up being is that I tend to put an outline together, rather, where I have chapters in a certain sequence, and then each chapter is basically kind of a linked paper between the two. So every day I was getting up, while I was fighting through the COVID recovery, and I'd write 10 pages or 15 pages, whatever it was, doesn't matter. At 3,000 words, essentially, is what I was aiming for, because that's usually the sweet spot. I've kind of learned from doing this, at least for nonfiction, that's where it is. So I ended up writing them all, and I put them together, and I think it's very good. I mean, the thing I think that people will struggle with in this audience is not so much the description of why America is in trouble. You'll understand that, and you'll find some interesting things. It really, It basically did, in the first half of the book, a sort of coming Civil War type analysis in a come out of Babylon framework to really look at the depths of the problems. But the second half of the book, which will be the more useful ones to the ones who use it well, is about how one begins their withdrawal from the world. And I got to tell you, the time is now. Let's say the story on Stu Peters is right about this water pollution contamination. I mean, the thing is, everyone's waiting for the big event, the big shock to get out. Everyone's saying, I'm going to collect my last resources, but you don't want to be stuck waiting when things get bad. I do think, I imagine, and this is a big guess, that there's decent odds you're going to have the summer to detach yourself from the system. You need to use that time. You need to be assertive about it. You need to be planning. You need to be moving. You need to be carrying yourself forward to a new location where there's a new opportunity for you if you're in a place where you don't feel confident and comfortable in your survivability. And the number one thing you need to be aware of is your human geography. The people around you are going to be the greatest asset or the greatest liability you face. If you live in a community that is not prepared and that has the wrong mindset, you're basically putting your life in your own hands, and you're doing it because you think there's an advantage today, and there is an advantage today. But at some point, you're playing roulette with your life. You got to think about cashing out, and I would submit to you humbly that this is the time to start doing so. So I recommend that very highly to you. Now, in terms of my own personal work, what am I doing? I have been doing a ton of research on Atlantis, which may or may not have interest to you, but for two reasons. Number one is to gain a personal perspective on where I think it might be. And by the way, I think the people who are making the argument that it's around the reshot structure in Mauritania have a heck of an argument to them. If you want, actually look it up. You could just a ton of videos on it. I don't need to tell you every little detail of it, but it's an interesting story if you want to look into it. I mean, I've been looking at a number of different books. I have the Donnelly book that I'm going to get to here in the next week, as well as the Flood Myths of the Old Testament. The interesting thing about the end of time is a lot of ways we have to go back to the beginning to understand what's happening at the end here, as we watch the world dissemble itself. So, going to continue doing that, and as I gain a better understanding of what that is, I do think I'm going to work eventually, probably, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks from now, toward the idea. By then we'll have the new book out, and what I'll be working on is a fiction series that is designed to give a good story that has some archaeological truth to it, that has a lush novel setting, and what it will do. And unlike other people who are just saying, oh, I picked Atlantis, I'm trying to actually use my historian and archaeological skills to kind of reconstruct what Atlantis would have been like, because it's a classic story, supposedly, if you believe the Casey story, that there were people who fell because they became too in touch with their material nature, and there were people who stood against them of a spiritual nature, and ultimately they fell, and that's why the Lord ended up getting involved, and that's probably the story of what happened in Genesis 6. But from a Christian perspective, what I'm looking to do is put something out there where you're going to have a hero that you can relate to, and I'll just give you a pro tip. He's going to be a young man who's going to be someone who stands on values, and it's not that he has to be hostile. I mean, there'll be fights involved. There has to be, because otherwise it's not that interesting. But what I want to do is we need a hero for our age and a struggle we can relate to. We need our token, and unfortunately all we get is token representation. So we're going to try to do that, and I'll be honest with you, fiction will be a new challenge for me, but I've been staring into the abyss for so damn long. I mean, what can I tell you? I mean, I don't know how much time we have left, and I've reached a point where looking at a decline that is unending and somewhat predictable is very difficult to continue. Now, what I will say is that we did have, I mean, things look like they've settled down a little bit. Lavrov was out there, and he was basically saying that we are just trying to do this special operation, which seems to me like Russia's pulling back. But then you have Kadyrov, the Chechen guy, saying that, oh, we're going to have bigger attacks. Maybe we'll have a nuke in Kiev or something. We'll see what happens. I don't know which is the actual truth of what's going to emerge. I continue to be fascinated by what's happening in China, why they're doing this in Shanghai, what is going on there. Something is not what it seems. We don't know the story, and it's something we need to discern very, very quickly. Let's see, domestically, what else? some people were talking about things related to indictments and all the other crap. I mean, if you still think something's coming out of congressional politics, do me a favor and unsubscribe. Just please go away. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. I mean, for the rest of you, please like and subscribe. Please support the podcast. CVC PRV is the Venmo, PO Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine 04739. Um, no, you're not getting help from Washington. Washington is your enemy. I mean, and you know, you can even see it. I mean, what you have? Trump went out there and he was supporting, what was it, Dr. Oz in the Pennsylvania primary. The dude's going to be pro choice. I mean, but Trump doesn't care. And that's why, you know, you shouldn't care about him. And, you know, a lot of people look at DeSantis as the next great hope. But nothing ever changes in Washington because that's where the money is. You can't change the things here in the way the debt works. And I'll tell you what, if you really want to know if anyone's worth talking about in politics, if they're talking about debt and the banking system and what they're doing, that's someone, regardless of if they're a Democrat or Republican, that deserves your attention. If they don't ever go there, you don't need to care about them, and you don't need to invest your time, your money, and your effort behind these things. If all they're willing to do is talk crap, figure out who will give you the best deal in terms of what you can take for yourself and your family as resources that you can begin to accumulate for the days ahead, and do so. Ideally, whoever it'll be will not be someone who throws you in jail for existing. You know, because I have a lot of people. I actually had a conversation with some somewhat normie and somewhat aware people this morning that I wasn't expecting in a totally different forum, which is just not even about that. And they were asking, why don't people care? Why is there such fatalism? Why doesn't anyone do anything? And the answer is you can't. I mean, you try to do it, you'll see what happens. It's impossible. The only thing you can do is take the whole thing down. And if you take the whole thing down, if you try to do it inorganic, well, I should say inorganic. If you try to do it as a mode of action, you're going to be spending the rest of your life sitting in a box, hearing about how bad you are because you wanted to destroy a system that was degenerate. Conversely, if you sit back and just kind of wait and do what you're doing now and be very comfy, the thing will take care of itself. And is this the most moral act? Well, of course it isn't. The moral act is to be able to take care of your own, and that's what the Pineland concept is about. It's about, as this falls, you build the alternative and you begin bringing the people into your orbit, and that's what we're working on here constantly. You know, as spring breaks here in northern Maine, I'm excited to say, I'll tell you, we got some new people who are moving up this way, who have chosen to do so because they see it as part of their own survival strategy. They're not doing it because of anything special I did, but I'm excited to see people making that decision and knowing where they're coming from. I think they're going to be pleased by the decision that they made to get to a place of lower population density, of less crime, of greater cultural homogeneity, and a chance for a better life for themselves, for their families. And a lot of people, you know, who are in our orbit, they're not political. And I respect that. I don't require people to be. You know, there are people who like to make everything political. I've told you, I'm post-partisan, I'm post-national. I don't care about that anymore. I mean, people like to try to scorch, you know, cheap hits off me because they think I make good copy, and I suppose I do. That happens from time to time, but it's not really about, I could care less. I mean, we got I'll tell you, here in Maine, we got a governor's election. We got Janet Mills, who is a terrible, energy swilling, people screwing over bitch. Who is an ugly sort of tyrant, and then we got Paul LePage coming back, who's kind of like, I don't know, like if you had how should I say, a more race realist Sean Hannity, that's kind of what he's like. And he'll probably win, not because he deserves to or doesn't deserve to, but because the economy is going to be so bad by the time we hit November. There's nothing any incumbent's going to be able to do to survive that wave, and not that he has any solution to it. I mean, the reality of the solution is you're going to have to consider the needs of the people. And so what we will see in the intermediate term is eventually at some point the Democrats, once their ratings get low enough, they'll get desperate enough, they'll try to throw some money at the people. They'll have to. They'll have no other choice. I mean, they'll try to funnel it through all their favorite little NGOs and benefits, but at some point, direct money is what they're going to try to do as a bailout, probably around late summer. Mm. I mean, how much money can you send to Ukraine for weapons that are going to be basically transferred eventually to Israeli arms dealers? I mean, and that's actually what's been happening over there. It's pretty funny to read about it. I mean, it's sad, but what happens is the Ukrainians don't really want to fight. The Russians don't really want to fight. But all those free weapons that are unmarked because they can't be tracked back to NATO are a bazaar for there. So if you ever want to reenact, the whole, what's the War Dogs movie? and you have that level of agency. I know a couple people in our audience too. You might want to go over there and get yourself an arsenal. Apparently, you can get it on the cheap, especially if you can speak a little bit of Russian or Ukrainian. As long as the Pinelanders support that altogether, as long as you don't call it Kiev. There's an I in there. Remember to use it. So what else is out there? Let me just take a quick look here at the news before I call it a morning here, because there's not I'm purposely have been kind of dialing it back just a little bit for one big reasons, and one of the reasons why I have been doing that is because it's a chance for you to catch your breath, and there's nothing on here that I feel that you need to know beyond what you should already know, other than to go collect more supplies, to be ready to work on growing. Expect food scarcity to be the big problem coming forward. Although there is this hint that there's going to be another sickness. Some people are saying it's going to be bird flu. Some people are saying it's going to be hemorrhagic fever. One thing we have to continue to keep an eye on, it's not something we talk about too much on this channel here, but we do talk about it a lot more over on the Telegram side, is the long-term impacts of the population who chose the available treatments. That is something that's going to be a problem that we should expect to become more of a problem. I think it will manifest more in the later months, but people are getting sick. You see the number of athletes as one example at various events who are just not able to keep with it. And that is something that's going to be another problem. And they've been promising there's going to be another threat of this going through. And if you decide you want to take those chances, you're going to be in a pretty bad way. But if it gets worse, they're going to put the same awful lockdowns, and they're going to say, hey, we believe in democracy and liberty, except for you, sit in your house, you damn, terrorists. And they've already pre-branded it, what they're going to define the people who resist this. So if you've held out this long, God bless you, good for you. If you haven't, repent and ask for the Lord to forgive you, and be a little wiser next time around. And let's try to stay strong against those challenges they have. Just one real fast comment here. If you're here, please hit like and subscribe. If you check your subscriptions there and do hit like, it helps with the algorithm. I say that. You know what? I'll tell you honest with you. I don't think it helps. I don't think it does jack with the algorithm. That's what people always say. The algorithm exists to compartmentalize this. Like, I was reading a thread. Amazon 4chan, and it was talking about how it suggested the pages you saw were customized by an AI bot to be able to. Who's in the shower? Nobody's in the shower today, so the shower's looking pretty good. But it was customized by an AI bot to seek to get you to engage, to ask certain questions. And I know that sounds sort of crazy, but it really isn't that hard of a thing to go ahead and put 3 or 4 different questions in front of someone and to put an inducement. So who knows if that's true or not, but I do feel increasingly the internet is being customized to our individual responses, and that what's happening is we are being more and more put into separate boxes where our ability to reach others is highly circumscribed. And I've found this because, for instance, when I do certain things, I know because I've orchestrated at least 3 different breakouts to get my own message out there. Like when we did CV Central, they didn't expect me to go to podcast, and they weren't ready for me. So I was able to get the numbers up to about 30 grand, and then they were able to send their flunkies to get me canceled, because that's why they pre-brand and pre-stamp people. People who have dangerous ideas are branded as dissidents so that those ideas can be quarantined. And then whatever they have to do financially to the individuals to hurt them. That's why when you buy the books, when you buy the audiobooks, when you send support for the program, you help so much, because it allows me to keep talking, which is kind of a challenge, but you have to keep at it. But finding the media you can get out there where you're not going to be taken down for saying things that are offensive is the problem. And that's why what Musk is doing is actually potentially quite important, because that could be an opening to a lot of other things, and success breeds success, and maybe you can push back on the sort of corporate hegemony just a little bit. But ultimately, you have to remember it's probably an organization being set up to encourage chaos that's causing more strife rather than solving the problem, which is why you need internal communications, which is why we do this thing we do with the Pineland concept. But I'm just saying it because it's gotten to the point where it's very hard to reach out beyond your sort of narrow sphere unless you do it metaphorically, which is why we got to go to fiction, because it's the only way you can kind of get people aware and get the ideas out there. So that's what I'm going to have to do. And in the meantime, we can still talk with each other. We do this. We have the Telegram. That's helpful. And we continue to be aware of what's happening out there. So that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions you want to throw up or any comments, please do so. Let's see. Wash off the sins of this imploding nation, a land shower of Christians of holy water. I tell you what, John, I tell you the truth of it. The Lord says in many places that, when people become so far removed from Him, there will be consequences. I mean, you want to read it from a biblical perspective, spend some time marinating in the books of Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Isaiah, and you'll definitely see it's there. So it's worth taking a look. But yeah, things could get very bad. They could get bad very quick. But we're going to just be stuck hurrying up and waiting, and that's the story too. That this may take a while, and if it does, we're going to sit back, and there's not much we can do. People are going to go through the motions, and I mean, to be honest with you, I kind of hate that because things need to be happening, but they're not, and there's not much you or I can do to change that. But hey, that's where we are in the story, so let's honor that. In fact, let's say a prayer. Heavenly Father, we just pray today that your will be done and that you guide us to a place pleasing to you, that you remove those things which are displeasing to you, and that you help those of us who worship you to come through. We understand this is a holy week and just want to have the mindset of the sacrifice of Christ in how we look out for each other and how we look to serve you. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. So thank you, fellow Pinelanders, for being here. We'll see if something interesting comes up. I've been spending more time in the chat. Like I said, podcasts will follow as events warrant. Next one, I've been trying to alternate. We did a survey, and I was asking the audience if you like the morning shows or you like the evening shows, and you basically split 50-50. So I'm going to try to alternate and try to get you at least 2 of each a week. I think that's a pretty good balance. I can manage that, and I can manage that even if events are kind of slow. I'll time it to when there's things to talk about or when I find things. Or if you send me things, if you find something really good, send it to me. It's a two-way street. Information needs to flow up as much as down. So that sounds good to me. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for everyone who supports the program. We'll have more news on the book coming here around the middle to the end of next week. And thank you. I am Tom Kaczynski, Pineland.